Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. We've got an awesome episode today for you on this beautiful Saturday morning. It is Saturday, April 10th. College basketball season just concluded this week. Baylor was crowned the national champion. Baseball has started. Most sports fans are waiting for the NBA playoffs, but not me. We have the biggest event in sports entertainment, if not one of the biggest events in all of sports entertainment, and that is the NFL Draft. That is only 3 weeks away. So on today's episode, I'll be talking about Sam Darnold being traded to the Carolina Panthers. That was the big storyline this week. I'm going to get into winners and losers of the trade and how this affects the upcoming draft with quarterbacks specifically. For my next segments, I'll cover what the Atlanta Falcons should do with the 4th overall selection and what teams are going to be going after with that pick. The NFL also added a 17th game to each team's schedule, so I will dive into which are my favorites to look forward to, what are some good matchups, and what are some matchups specifically in each of those games. And then I'll finally get into the rest of the news around the football world, including the ongoing Deshaun Watson drama. I'm talking about this at the end of every episode just because there's always short little tidbits and updates each week that we're learning, but I'm going to get into that and some likely trade-ups in the draft, and I'll also break down the NFC South division. So Sam Darnold was traded to the Carolina Panthers. Wow, this kind of shocked me. After last week's episode, I was really a firm believer that the Jets were going to take a quarterback at number 2 overall, but part of me kind of started to think that the 49ers trading up to that number 3 spot had somehow deterred the Jets from taking a quarterback, just because I thought if the 49ers had someone in mind, they would want to know for sure that the Jets aren't taking a quarterback. And the relationship with 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan and the Jets head coach Robert Saleh led me to kind of think there was something possible there in terms of the Jets not taking a quarterback. But overall, Sam Darnold, he was traded for a 2021 6th round pick, a 2nd round pick in 2022. That's very valuable, and a 4th round pick in 2022. That's 3 picks total for a quarterback that the Jets and the Jets fans had pretty much all but given hope on. So there are a lot of implications on the draft from this trade. Obviously now it's who the Jets will take at number 3, I think, or at number 2. I think we have a pretty good idea about that. And now the 49ers are going to have a tougher decision to make at number 3, and just the overall eagerness for quarterbacks in the draft, I think, is going to be very prevalent now. And just with teams trading up and trying to get their guy. So the Panthers, they continue to build their young roster. They obviously think they can get something out of Sam Darnold that they weren't getting out of him in New York. They have a decision to make with Teddy Bridgewater, so I'll get into that too. And they're still paying Darnold pretty big money. So I'm going to kind of talk about why the Jets clearly win this trade and are set up well for the immediate future of this franchise. So the Jets, I think the Jets win this trade because, like I said, they get 3 picks for a quarterback that there just wasn't all too much demand for. And a second rounder is a pretty big deal. A 4th rounder is those are good players that can turn up, guys that can turn out to be really good players in the NFL. So they get 3 picks for a quarterback. I don't understand the eagerness in Carolina. I feel like you could have waited to make this move closer to draft night. I don't think there was a market out there really for Sam Darnold. I don't think there were a lot of teams knocking on the Jets' door. So I think the Jets were happy to get this call. I could have seen the Jets sticking with Darnold, like I was talking about earlier, if their pick wasn't so high. That's really what I was kind of honing in on last week, is their pick at number 2. You're only that high in the draft so many times. And when you have this window where you have a new head coach, all this turnover, all this transition, it's a perfect time to get a quarterback at that number 2 spot, a possible franchise guy, just because you're trying to sell your fan base on something new, some change, and it's a lot of turnover. And overall, I think this is the best move the Jets could have made. As far as Darnold goes, it's kind of similar to the Carson Wentz trade. The Panthers are going to hope to develop a quarterback that just hasn't played well recently. He really hasn't. And hopefully the Panthers see a lot of the attributes that some people like about Sam Darnold, kind of similar to what the Colts liked in Carson Wentz. But at the end of the day, you're still kind of hoping that this quarterback can turn around and flip the page moving forward. That's the other thing. The Panthers still have to pay off the rest of Sam Darnold's first-round contract. He has 2 years remaining with the 5th-year deal. And that 5th-year deal is a big cap hit. And based on the overall draft capital they gave up, 3 picks, it would make sense for the Panthers not to keep Darnold past next season. So that's what Pro Football Talk was reporting, that they're planning on keeping him around for that 5th-year option. His 5th-year option salary is projected to be $18.9 million in 2 seasons. That was one of the reasons I thought the Jets were kind of going to let him go, just because he is that big of a hit, being the former number 2 overall selection. And I don't know, that's just pretty crazy to me, just because it reminds me of when Kyler Murray was coming out to the NFL, and people were debating whether Kyler Murray should go play baseball and play with those crazy contracts and make unlimited money with no salary cap. But my whole argument back when that happened was he's going to be a first-round pick no matter what. And you see this with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold just has not performed well in his 3 seasons in New York. But he was a number 2 overall pick, and the 5th-year option for first-round picks kind of works like somewhat of an average of the top 10 highest prior salaries for the players at the same position. So every time a quarterback gets a crazy contract, that Sam Darnold's 5th-year option salary goes up, and it's projected to be at $18.9 million now, but who knows where that could be in 2 years. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, just because you really are set. If you were picked early in the draft, you really are set financially, and that was my whole argument with the Kyler Murray situation. That's just kind of why I wanted to bring it up. And the Jets, I also think they won this trade because they get to go all in on Zach Wilson, and that's what I wanted them to do from the start. So all signs point to the Jets taking that BYU quarterback. I thought there was a chance they were planning on moving out of that spot. Like I said, I thought Shanahan and Saleh's relationship would have led to some conversations before the draft, and I thought that kind of played a role into why the 49ers traded up to where they did. But that was just kind of thoughts in my head. I always thought the Jets were going to take a quarterback at number 2 overall, and the 49ers are just going to have to adjust on the fly. But I think when you look at Zach Wilson being your starting quarterback next year, that's much better than having Sam Darnold in there in terms of just hope for your fan base and overall, I think, team morale. Having a new leader, having a new head honcho in the building, I think is huge. Also, that's just the thing. Darnold kind of needed a change of scenery, and I think this is also a win-win. I know I say the Jets won that trade, but I think this very well could be a win-win trade. And Wilson kind of has the highest ceiling of any QB in this draft, and I've talked about his skills with the young weapons in New York that could be intriguing. But overall, Sam Darnold, I think, is going to be in a great spot with the new head coach, and let's see if they can kind of maximize the rest of his talent that he has. But the Jets should kind of be looking to target receiver, most likely O-lineman early in the second round with that early second round pick. But it's the start of a complete rebuild, and I think they're going to be competitive. I really do. I think Robert Saleh is a great head coach. I've talked about him I've just exhausted talking about Robert Saleh and how much I like him as a head coach, but I think it's going to be fun to watch. Fans will be more excited. And they hired a really good offensive coordinator. I think this was a very good hire. Robert Saleh brought Mike LaFleur, brother of Packers coach Matt LaFleur, along with him to New York. He's pretty much tasked with molding Wilson into this franchise quarterback, and he was the former passing game coordinator out of San Francisco. He studied under Kyle Shanahan, so I just think all those schemes that Kyle Shanahan does in the run game, in the play action, overall just in the passing game, getting guys open, I think those are going to be prevalent in New York, which I think is very intriguing if you were a Jets fan. And also just you kind of have that chemistry with Saleh, so you have that offensive coordinator, head coach chemistry. Saleh's more of the defensive mind, so he'll be handling the defensive front. And Mike LaFleur will have full control of that offense and Zach Wilson. So overall, I love the staff. I love the prospects of Wilson being in New York. All that needs to happen now is they just need to draft him. So I do think there's a chance something changes. They could surprise people and take Justin Fields at number 2 overall. They could take Mac Jones and ruin the 49ers' plans, but I think just the way everyone around the league is talking about Zach Wilson, and I know there was a shoulder injury concern, but the Jets have said that they're not worried about that at all. The way people are talking about Zach Wilson's kind of projectability and just overall potential makes me really believe that the Jets are taking him number 2. So what about Sam Darnold? I know I talked about this a lot last week, but he had an unfair deal in New York. But I know you kind of have to look at it both ways because he wasn't really anything truly special. And when you're looking for a difference maker, a quarterback, I think you would have seen the Jets able to win more games with Sam Darnold at the helm. So he's only played in 38 games in 3 seasons. No more than 13 games this season. He had some bad moments in New York, I'm not going to lie. He had the infamous I'm Seeing Ghost clip on Monday Night Football where he was being pressured and wasn't able to feel pressure, and he was talking to his coach in the mic or talking to some players, and he said, I'm seeing ghosts, which is just a brutal clip to have out there. Crazy that ESPN was able to pick that up on Monday Night Football, but overall that was pretty damaging just because when you say I'm seeing ghosts, that just means you have no feel for the overall pressure or the game around you, and that was a bad look. Last season, he had a mono episode for the Jets. That was just absolutely brutal. It was the most Jets storyline ever, and he had mono and missed quite a bit of time with mono. And obviously, people know that as the disease that you get from kissing people, so people wanted to know what the deal with that is, and there's just all that negative attention surrounding him with that. He's been below 60% completion percentage in 2 of 3 years, and he was barely above 60 in one of those years. That's just bad. He hasn't been able to complete many passes because he was labeled kind of as a project out of the draft, but he was just being touted as this guy with incredible arm talent, athleticism, which we've seen flashes of. But he always threw too many interceptions, always had too many turnovers, had fumble problems. I think people knew this is what they were going to get, but this is the same problems have persisted in the NFL. So he threw 39 interceptions. In 3 seasons, he threw 39 interceptions, which is just way too many turnovers, I think. There's obviously the whole dilemma with having 3 different offensive coordinators, 3 different coaches. Adam Gase, it can't be stressed enough. I think he's the worst coach in the history of the NFL. The way he did everything in New York, I really do think that. I really think he's one of the worst head coaches to be in the NFL because, Adam Gase was just labeled as a quarterback whisperer after coaching Peyton Manning in Denver. Peyton Manning, Hall of Fame quarterback Peyton Manning. And then he got a pretty average year out of Jay Cutler 1 year as the Bears offensive coordinator. And then right then he was labeled offensive guru, quarterback whisperer. So he really didn't live up to that name at all. And he was not a quarterback whisperer. He did not help Sam Darnold's development. He probably damaged Sam Darnold's development. But you also talk about no wide receivers. Not really an ideal situation for Sam at all. But I think overall, he was 2-10 last year. 2 wins, 10 losses, 13 wins and 25 losses in his career as an NFL starter. Obviously, those circumstances are not ideal, but don't you think if he was a true franchise quarterback, he would have shown us so much more if he was really something special? That's just what I believe. Not to say that he can't be a solid, average quarterback in the NFL. I just don't think that potential can really be maximized out of Sam Darnold. So it's just going to take a lot of work. And it's not going to be... I'm not saying he can't be great in Carolina. I'm not saying he can't run that offense to the best of his ability, but it's just going to take a lot of work. So the Panthers, what are the Panthers going to look like next year? Because they have a new head coach in Matt Rule. It's going to be his second year coming up. Matt Rule, I really like him as a NFL head coach. He's a high-energy guy, former college coach, so he knows how to work with young players and kind of have that chemistry. He's really kind of that modern NFL coach in my eyes. He has great weapons. He finished 5-11 last year in a tough division with Super Bowl champs, might I add you, who didn't even win the division. They were a competitive young team. He's an offensive-minded coach, but they're going to have to kind of really just be on Darnold and teach him everything possible, really, to succeed in that offense. But Carolina has some great weapons. They really do, because they have DJ Moore, a bright young wide receiver out of Maryland. Robbie Anderson, the former Jet, gets reunited with Sam Darnold. They had some chemistry. I think that's played a huge role in getting Sam Darnold. I think Robbie Anderson, like Sam Darnold, I think they're friends, and I think that they can have kind of build off that chemistry that they started with in New York. They have a great rushing attack. Even when Christian McCaffrey went down last year, Mike Davis was running all over the field. They still need some more offensive linemen, but having Christian McCaffrey and those receivers is something that Sam Darnold has just never had in New York. So I think the change of scenery obviously is incredible for Sam Darnold, but also just getting some weapons and getting some players around him I think is going to be huge. Overall, that coaching continuity is starting to build in Carolina, although it's only been 1 year, but it's something different than what Darnold was seeing year in and year out in New York. And Sam Darnold looks excited, so I think he can really kind of just revitalize his career here if he really tries to. And there was a video being released on social media after the news where some of Sam's friends kind of had a party for him, for a Panthers party. There was blue balloons everywhere. All his friends and family were around. He shows up. Everyone goes crazy. Sam Darnold was hyped. That was just pretty cool to see. And look, sometimes this is what quarterbacks need. They need to get out of town. They need a fresh start. And it's can't be said enough how much Sam Darnold needed a fresh start. So here's the thing. This move, in a way, kind of, I don't know. It will likely be the make or break coaching decision or kind of development for Matt Rule, because you take this swing, unless you take a swing at quarterback in the next 3 years, I think like Matt Rule's early career as an NFL head coach will be labeled as whether he could develop Sam Darnold. Now, that's not all up to him. Sam Darnold obviously has to play well, but you made this decision. You obviously thought you could get something out of Sam Darnold. So I think this could be the make or break kind of decision for Matt Rule. Obviously, their defense needs a lot more talent. They need to target O-line or secondary in the draft. I think they have the number 8 overall pick still. I love Rashawn Slater, the O-lineman out of Northwestern. He's one of my favorite prospects in the draft over Penei Sewell, who people have listed as the number 1 offensive lineman out of Oregon. If Slater falls to 8 like I see him doing, then I think that will be a great offseason for the Panthers. And yeah, I don't know. You kind of have to kind of compartmentalize how well Matt Rule can do developing Sam Darnold and how well he's doing building a football culture and building a team and also just winning games. They need to win games above all else. So what do they do with Teddy Bridgewater now? Because Teddy Bridgewater could be on the move. They could keep him. I feel bad for Teddy Bridgewater. He's bouncing from team to team each year, it seems. The Vikings, he started the Vikings, had a gruesome injury after he had a pretty promising start in Minnesota, started to win games, got them to the playoffs. They would have advanced if it wasn't for that Blair Walsh missed field goal. I'll never forget that, just the 20-yard chip shot that he shanked and sending Seattle on to the next round of the playoffs. But he had that gruesome injury in Minnesota in practice. He dislocated his knee. I don't think that helped, but he looked pretty healthy last year. I think he still has great attributes, and I don't know if Sam Darnold is all that better than him right now. I really don't. But overall, he's a likable guy. Teammates really love him. Coaches like to coach him. Completed almost 70% of his passes last year, which is way better than Sam Darnold. He had 3,700 yards, 15-11 on touchdown to interception ratio. So not great stats, but a guy that can still win games, I think, for a solid team with a good defense. Nonetheless, I hope there's some sort of kind of quarterback competition. I love seeing those kind of developments in the offseason. But I'm going to kind of get into what this overall trade means for the 49ers and the rest of the draft. But first, I'm going to have to get into a quick commercial break. I appreciate all you guys for listening. I'll be right back. This is a quick word from our sponsors. Again, you're listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the Golden State Media Concepts. I'll be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so I just got done talking about Teddy Bridgewater possibly being on the move. I hope you enjoyed those quick words from our sponsors at GSMC, Golden State Media Concepts. Again, I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. I'm now kind of going to talk about what overall that Sam Darnold trade means for the 49ers and also the rest of the draft, because a lot of people were kind of waiting to see what the Jets were going to do. Now that we kind of have a better idea that they're going to take a quarterback, the heads kind of turn towards the Atlanta Falcons, who have that coveted number 4 overall pick in this year's draft. So really the water kind of clears. I first want to get into how this affects the 49ers, because the water kind of clears up for them to select a quarterback, and they have a better idea of who's going to be available. So I talked about this extensively last week on who the 49ers should take, who it sounds like they're going to take, and I really want them to take Justin Fields, but there's so much buzz, and there's been more buzz this week about the 49ers wanting to take Mac Jones, and that doesn't completely surprise me. I'm just a little baffled by the overall developments in this quarterback draft. But so I said there's too much buzz around Mac Jones with the 49ers, and I think some of that can just be hearsay, could just be rumors. But when there's just so many reports, I kind of start to think, okay, something's real here. There's actually some tangible passion for Mac Jones that the 49ers have. But it's the more and more I kind of read about these quarterbacks in this draft process, it sounds like Justin Fields is going to need a year to kind of sit and develop. And I don't know if that's true. But all I know is that the 49ers may be viewing him that way. And the 49ers are kind of in a spot right now where they need to win right away. They need to win now. And that kind of conflicts with what they originally said to how they're keeping Jimmy G. So if you go by that book, I think Justin Fields would be a great pick, but they're not going to keep Jimmy G. They're going to trade him. I 100% believe that. And in that case, I guess Mac Jones somewhat makes more sense for them because they need a quarterback that is NFL ready now. I really just don't know what to believe with the 49ers. I think they could surprise some people, or they could just seriously just take Mac Jones and move on in the draft. But overall, I think Kyle Shanahan's looking for someone who can make simple throws. More importantly, just run his offense, I think. And Justin Fields might not be able to do that to the extent that Kyle Shanahan wants. There's a lot of concerns with Justin Fields' ability to kind of move on from the second read and make decisions quick. I saw a recent tweet from Pro Football Focus that kind of directly contradicted that kind of overall evaluation of Fields. But it's true. There were some times last year, especially in the national championship, where he kind of failed to get off the first read and wasn't making decisions as quickly as you think you need. But I don't know. I think Justin Fields is a high IQ guy. There's a lot of concerns with his ability to, like I said, move on from the second read, but also just make quick decisions. And Mac Jones kind of seemed to do that at a high level with all the options that he had in Bama. So I think if you look at what Bama kind of had in that offense, they had so many first-round picks, so many future NFL players that are going to get selected in this draft and in drafts in the future. But Mac Jones still had to make really quick decisions. Even though Devontae Smith was wide open 90% of the time, he still had to make quick reads and get the ball to the right places on time, which is what he did exceptionally well. So maybe that's really what's sticking out to the 49ers with Mac Jones. Overall, I just don't think that would be the best move. But I can't argue with the logic there. I really can't. So now we kind of got to get into the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons have a big decision to make at number 4 overall. I have 5 kind of different draft scenarios that I really like from them. And overall, they just have a lot of power with that 4th overall pick. They have a lot of options to do. They're a team that's somewhat in that rebuilding stage, but they have a lot of win-now talent. And I don't think they should be in that rebuilding mentality. Kind of just on that rebuild in the fly mentality, just always stocking up picks, stocking up that roster. But I imagine a lot of teams have been calling them lately, trying to trade up to that number 4 spot. And I think this is a decision that will be made closer to the draft, because I just think that Atlanta's really trying to weigh all of their options. So I think they're going to take their time. They have some needs at quarterback, a lot of needs on defense, and they could be looking for a new wideout with Calvin Ridley's rookie contract soon to expire. Julio Jones is still really expensive, even though he's a top 5 receiver in the NFL. He's due almost $27 million in guaranteed money for the next 2 seasons, which is a big hit. And really, I think this is one of the more intriguing teams in the draft, just because they have so many options. There's so many possibilities. And like I said, it's one of the more intriguing draft spots at number 4 overall, just because of who could be available at that spot. So the Falcons, similar to the Jets, they did a complete overhaul of the coaching staff. There's a lot of new faces in Atlanta. They fired Dan Quinn after having not made the postseason for the last 3 years. It really is crazy because they've never recovered from that Super Bowl hangover after blowing the 28-3 lead against the Patriots. And it's pretty sad to think about just the toll that game had on this whole franchise for the next 3-4 years. Because the next year they got bounced in the first round, and they haven't been able to make the playoffs since then. So overall, they have some really intriguing pieces in the secondary. A.J. Terrell, the Clemson cornerback, played really well at some times last year for them. I think he's going to be their starting cornerback number 1 from the get-go, and I think he has to take some big strides in his development for that defense. I think they have a top 10 quarterback in Matt Ryan. They have Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. Darqueze Dennard is another good corner that I like. And they showed fight last season. They showed some encouraging signs with their interim head coach. Dan Quinn got fired mid-season. They started 0-5, which is just a brutal start. They had some crazy comeback losses early in the year to the Bears. Down, they were up 3 scores late, relatively late. They were up big against the Cowboys, ended up losing that game, and it was just more of the same of Dan Quinn not being able to close out games. So the Falcons really just seen enough from him at that point. It has to be frustrating for that team just because of how many games they should have won. And just overall, they were always so close to getting over that hump, and they couldn't really just put it all together. So I don't know. I feel bad for Falcons fans. That just had to be so frustrating to watch year in and year out with how many leads they've blown in recent memory. But they have some intriguing pieces, like I said, and they hired a new coach. I haven't even talked about their new coach yet, Arthur Smith. So Arthur Smith gets his first shot as an NFL head coach with the Atlanta Falcons. He is labeled as a quarterback guru, quarterback whisperer, however you want to call it, the Adam Gase label, if you will. But this is definitely more deserving than Adam Gase because Arthur Smith, he is really admired for the work that he did with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill was picked up for nothing. They signed him to be a backup behind Marcus Mariota. And when Marcus Mariota didn't work out, Ryan Tannehill was able to come in, run that offense to perfection, give the ball to Derrick Henry, run play action, and then just he got a stronger. He seemed to just get more accurate. As crazy as that sounds, he got more accurate. His arm strength was always there. Although he was a former wide receiver, and there were a lot of questions if he would ever play quarterback even again after his stint with the Dolphins. There were also a lot of injuries, and he's been healthy and been on the field since then. So turning Ryan Tannehill into a top-half quarterback, I think, is just huge on the resume for Arthur Smith. And however this bodes for Matt Ryan, I think they can possibly bring out the MVP Matt Ryan we saw a few years ago that led them to the Super Bowl with Arthur Smith, just kind of simplifying the offense and letting Matt Ryan do what he does and just sling the ball around and make throws to open players because Matt Ryan is as good as they come. I think he's definitely a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill. Like I said, he's a top 10 quarterback, and it might be one of his final years in Atlanta. So I'm going to get into some trade scenarios or some draft scenarios that I think the Falcons should do. My first being the Falcons select Justin Fields with the 4th overall pick. I think this would be just too good of an opportunity to pass up if he is still available at 4. That's why I kind of see them waiting it out and seeing who gets picked. Let's say Justin Fields surprisingly gets picked by the 49ers, and then the Falcons aren't really in love with the prospects of Mac Jones. That would be a scenario where I see them trading back. But if Justin Fields is available, like a lot of people, and I think he will be at that number 4 spot, go get him, Atlanta. Go get him and build for the future because you could be missing out on a generational talent if you don't take Justin Fields at that spot. And I don't really understand why his draft stock has fallen. I've talked about this for weeks now because coming out, it was always Trevor Lawrence 1, Justin Fields 2. And then pro days and the offseason happened and GMs and coaches are talking and they're finding things to like and not like about quarterbacks and rumors come up and opinions and generalizations get made and it's all really, to be honest, it's unfair. I think people honestly are making stuff up at this point. I saw Dan Orlovsky get on ESPN and say that he doesn't think that Justin Fields has the same passion for football as a lot of the other quarterbacks in the draft, which I think is just ludicrous to say. I know Kirk Herbstreit, the host of NFL or ESPN's College Game Day, he was very upset about Dan Orlovsky's comments about Justin Fields. He said, "Where is this coming from?" He said something along the lines from like, "Where is this coming from? You're just making sweeping generalizations. Like, that's just ridiculous to attack someone's character like that." And there's overall just character concerns with Fields that I just don't understand where these are coming from. He's been all football all the time the last year. And some people want to bring up the fact that he transferred. So many guys have transferred, and he went to Ohio State, which is one of the premier college football programs. Like, how can you blame him for that? And all he's done is really just perform and exceed expectations. So I've kind of stressed that point to its farthest point, just because I think Justin Fields, people are overthinking it, and I think he's going to be a really good quarterback. Maybe it takes him a year to develop, but that's what I think. That's why I think this makes even more sense, because they're not going to get rid of Matt Ryan just yet. And I think this is Fields. If you're talking about best fits for Justin Fields, I think this is it. I think if he goes to the Falcons, he can end up being the generational quarterback that I think he is. And a lot of this depends on what team he goes to. And I think this is one of the teams that if he goes there, they'll be able to maximize his absolute full potential. He's going to be able to have a year to kind of sit behind and learn from a former MVP and a really good quarterback that is a nice guy that teammates love and that has so much experience in the NFL, has learned so much in the NFL. And he's going to be able to pass all that knowledge on to him, which would just be, I think, great for Fields' development. And then he's also getting coached by Arthur Smith, who we saw what he did with Ryan Tannehill, what he can do with quarterbacks and overall. And I think that's just huge for the Falcons to have that kind of offensive mind in there to develop a young quarterback. So maybe the decision to kind of go offense in the head coaching search for the Falcons, they could have signed their interim head coach, who I thought turned a lot of heads, and they could have gone more defensive minded. But the fact that they went with Arthur Smith, the former Titans offensive coordinator, makes me kind of think that they want a quarterback in this draft. So I think that's the best option for the Falcons, and I think they really should make that move as quick as possible in the draft. So the next scenario I see for the Falcons in the 2021 NFL draft is trading back to the number 9 overall spot with the Broncos and selecting Kyle Pitts with that number 9 overall pick. I think that would make this offense pretty unstoppable in the foreseeable future, and they could likely get plenty more picks from that trade down from the Broncos, just because of how desperate the Broncos are for a quarterback at this point. So let's say the Falcons really aren't too interested in taking a quarterback. They don't love Justin Fields. They want to just stick it out with Matt Ryan for the next 2-3 years and then take a swing at quarterback after that. But if you get Matt Ryan, Kyle Pitts, I think that just whatever team Kyle Pitts goes to, he's going to have one of the more lethal receiving cores in the NFL. And overall, that offense would be unstoppable. Like I said, I think this trade makes sense because the Broncos need a quarterback. So I imagine they're going to be looking to trade up. And Pitts is my favorite prospect in the draft. And I think the Falcons watched him a great deal in the SEC play for Florida, just being close in Atlanta to the SEC football overall. Julio's contract future is kind of up in the air. Even though they're planning on paying him, they could try to get rid of him, try to shop him at some point. And Calvin Ridley's rookie deal is coming to a close, which could set up more weapons for the future if you add Kyle Pitts, and then you could let one of those guys go, which are probably going to be huge salary cap hits as well. They have Hayden Hurst at tight end, so tight end isn't necessarily a need. But I think overall Pitts, when you're drafting Pitts, you're projecting for just the overall ability and the uniqueness of his skill set. So I think that kind of favors the Falcons' plan right now of building towards the future rather than winning now. And overall, you can kind of make this pick and still kind of rebuild on the fly and win a lot of games with that offense and with those weapons. So that's my next draft scenario. I have another trade back scenario with the Patriots at number 15. If they all go all the way back to 15, I see them trying to target a defensive lineman. Again, New England, you never know what Bill Belichick's thinking. He could always have an eye on some of these quarterbacks, and I don't think this is too likely. It's not like Bill Belichick to trade up that far in the draft. That's a lot of spots. But look, he hasn't done anything this offseason like he normally does. He's spent more than he ever has in his history of free agency. So I think Bill Belichick could just be trying to do new things as their head coach to try to get that team turned around from last season into the playoffs. So if Bill Belichick doesn't like where the team's at with Cam Newton as their starter, I could see him trading up to number 4, and that would take a lot of picks. That would take a lot of draft capital, maybe some starters on the team. But overall, I think this trade would work for both teams because the Falcons, like I said, there's a lot of holes in that roster, and that defensive line really just, the talent isn't there. So in that scenario, at number 15, I see them taking either Christian Barmore out of Alabama or Jalen Phillips out of Miami. Jalen Phillips seems to be the most surefire thing at edge rusher, but overall the defensive line position in this draft is pretty weak compared to other years, and especially compared to the quarterbacks and wide receivers in this draft. Barmore has been projected late round, but you really can't go wrong with any Alabama players. And despite dealing with the knee injury last year, as a sophomore, he had 8 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss, and in 11 games played. Jalen Phillips is the guy I'm really intrigued by. He's the best pass rusher in the draft from what I've watched of all the prospects. He had 8 sacks and an iron interception last season. I think a lot of what GMs are intrigued by is the overall projectability of him. He's a freakish athlete. He has a 6'5", 270 frame. So I just think you really got to have some great coaches in there to kind of just develop him and refine those pass rushing skills, because he has all the physical tools that you could possibly need from an edge rusher. The final trade back I see to number 14 with the Vikings. Now this is kind of a bit of a bold take for me, similar to the Patriots trade back. It's hard to see the Vikings giving up that much for the number 4 pick considering where they are at, but they're kind of in a similar but worse situation as the Falcons because they have a veteran quarterback that looks like they're going to be out the door in the somewhat near future. But Kirk Cousins is a lot worse than Matt Ryan in my eyes. So I think the Vikings kind of have had enough. They've gone as far as they can go with Kirk Cousins. And although it's probably more likely that I see them targeting a quarterback in the second round early on, it wouldn't hurt to go after someone like Trey Lance or Justin Fields and then sit behind Kirk Cousins. And this is something that has worked and hasn't worked in the NFL. Depends on how you look at it, but I think if you have the infrastructure, the coaching, the culture around your team, I think this is the way to go about it. And you saw with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes wouldn't have came onto the scene the way he did as his first year as a starter if he kind of didn't sit behind Alex Smith and develop in that offense's great year that they had with Patrick Mahomes on the bench. So I 100% think that. I do not think Patrick Mahomes would have developed or starred the way he did his first year in the starting in the NFL, throwing 50 touchdowns, winning MVP, if he hadn't had that year behind Alex Smith. So I would like the Vikings to do this, go after Trey Lance or Justin Fields in that case. They would still be in contention for a top wideout or D lineman in this draft. They maybe could add Devontae Smith as he continues to slip. Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle's stock continues to rise. I don't know where the Vikings are at with Adam Thielen, so overall the offense is pretty set. I think more of their targets are going to be at defense and kind of building that pass rush because the pass rush was non-existent last year in Minnesota. So overall for the Falcons, I'd want them to take a swing at quarterback. They know Matt Ryan has to be retiring or moving on in the next 3 years. They can give Arthur Smith, the new head coach, a chance to develop a really young QB, and you give him this chance right away, because a lot of times you see teams kind of give the head coach a few years. He doesn't do too well with whatever quarterback was previously in that situation. Then he drafts a quarterback, kind of adds more years to his tenure with that job automatically, when you really don't know if he could just not be good at developing quarterbacks. So you kind of do this right away. I think that is a lot more effective, and you give Arthur Smith a chance to coach a young quarterback early on. Overall, it's a tough division to win in. I'm going to get into the rest of the NFC South later. Each team is really good, and I think they have a chance to make noise. The way they were competitive last year, they were losing games down the stretch, but they were all really close games. They played the Chiefs more competitive than anyone played them down the stretch of the year, and I really do think they have a chance to make noise. They need to shore up that defensive line, and if they don't take quarterback, you gotta add as many draft picks as possible while trading back. And so I think you're either going to see two scenarios. You're going to see them stay at number 4, or you're going to see them trade back. And if they stay at number 4, they're going to draft a quarterback. That just is what makes sense, and that's the way the market seems to be going now. So I just finished talking about the Falcons. I talked about Sam Darnold's trade. We've got a quick commercial break brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. Those were my first 2 segments of today. Again, it is Saturday, April 10th for today's episode. Here's a quick word from our sponsors. I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. Going to get into my third segment of the day, and I'm going to be talking about the infamous 17th game added to the NFL schedule. Wow. I still can't really wrap my head around how there are going to be 17 games played by each team this season. I discussed this briefly last episode, but like I said, the NFL added an extra 17th game to each team's season. These are AFC versus NFC matchups, and it'll switch off which conference has more home teams playing in this kind of 17th week 18 game season. Because I believe in 2021 the AFC will have 9 home games as opposed to 8. For the NFC, and then that will just keep switching each year. I don't like this overall just because of the weirdness it's going to provide. this season, and with all the records, I just think it's going to be a lot of adjusting. But overall, it's more football. I can't complain about that from that perspective. But just from kind of taking the player's perspective, I 100% see how they don't like it, and not all of the players don't like it, but it's just some have voiced their concerns with it, and I think it could end up leading to overall a less quality product, depending on where teams are at that point in the year. And I just think adding another game just adds more injuries, can add more chance for bad stuff to happen, but also adds chance for a lot of excitement, a lot of premier athletes squaring off. And there are some great matchups the NFL added, because I think they made it a key to make some of these games marquee games. So I'm going to get into I'm going to power rank my favorite 17th games that are added to this schedule in 2021. And I'm going to give a little insight as to where I see those teams at that point in the 2021 season. Even though we know absolutely nothing at this point, things always change, and so much happens throughout a season, whether it's injuries, whether it's coaching changes, whether it's overall just player development not working out. So much happens, so to predict where these teams are at in week 17 is pretty crazy, but I'll do my best. So my first game on the power rankings is a pretty easy one. It's the Packers at the Kansas City Chiefs. That is going to be an incredible game. You have two of the best quarterbacks in the league, in my opinion. You have the best offensive you have the best coach, if not the second best coach in the NFL, in Andy Reid, and arguably the best offensive mind of the last 10 years in the NFL. And the Packers are bringing the band back together, it seems. We don't know where Aaron Rodgers stands. He's kind of said that it's out of his hands. He's going to let things play out. Very kind of shied away from directly answering some of the questions that are asked about his immediate future. But I like that. He's kind of living in the moment. Aaron Rodgers hosted Jeopardy recently, just started after the passing away of Alex Trebek, which I think was a dream of his. He's always watched Jeopardy, and I thought it was hilarious. The first episode they had, one of the contestants didn't know an answer, so he wrote down answer the question, who decided to kick that field goal, obviously referencing the NFC Championship game against the Buccaneers, where Matt LaFleur elected to kick a field goal, give the ball back to Tom Brady, when they could have gone for it on 4th and goal, which was one of the dumbest coaching moves of the year, in my opinion. And Aaron Rodgers definitely expressed his concerns with that after the year, but it was kind of funny to see contestants say that, and then Aaron Rodgers responded with, that is a great question. So you can tell they're both having fun. Aaron Rodgers is living his best life. It seems like he was very candid with the media all year, and I think he's in a great headspace overall. So I don't think he's too worried about the future. I think he just wants to win. I think he wants to win a Super Bowl, and he always is going to put his team in the best chance to do so. So, like I said, the Packers will have the same offensive unit. This game will feature two MVP candidates in Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes. You have two of the best receivers in the game in Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, which is going to be awesome. And I just think this game is going to be a complete shootout. Both just high-powered offenses. It's going to be in February, so it's going to be a little chilly, but both of these teams know how to play in the weather, and I don't know. I think it's going to be a great game. I see Aaron Rodgers able to really pick apart that Chiefs defense, but at the same time, the Packers defense isn't anything truly special, so Patrick Mahomes is going to have a field day of his own. Anyways, that game is going to be incredible, and that's my favorite game of the week 17 games added. The next game I have eyeballed is the Cowboys versus the Patriots. I have this game as my second overall Week 17 game added just because of the history behind the franchises. I expect both of these teams to be kind of towards the top of the division at the end of the year, both with Dak's return, the Cowboys' overall presence in that division. I think they'll be able to be at the top with the Washington football team. Don't sleep on Jalen Hurts, though. I've talked about Jalen Hurts. Don't sleep on Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, But no, I'm in all seriousness, it's going to be the Cowboys and the football team at the top of that division. So there's definitely some playoff implications there. And the Patriots, I predict them to be at the top of their division, if not at first behind the Bills, who are my Super Bowl contender. I'm going to have them second, and at that point, and hopefully in a wild card spot, because that would mean either they drafted a quarterback that came onto the scene and played incredibly well, or Cam Newton is lighting it up and he has all those new weapons, and that 2 tight end offense is really humming, and the pieces are back on the defense. But overall, I think that kind of matchup between the Patriots and Bill Belichick's defense versus Dak Prescott and all of those weapons that the Cowboys have is going to be a great game. I think it's just going to be an incredible game, and I think overall what's on the line there is going to determine how well that game is played. But overall, just like I said, the history of the franchises, you got Mike McCarthy versus Bill Belichick. The Patriots handedly win in that coaching matchup, but overall the offensive talent on the Cowboys far exceeds the talent on the Patriots. So I think that offense-defense matchup is going to lead to a great game. The next game I have highlighted is the Buccaneers at the Indianapolis Colts. I think this is another fantastic game on the schedule. You have the reigning Super Bowl champs against an AFC powerhouse. The Colts were a team that I thought easily could have beat the Bills in that playoff game. If you look at that 1 4th and goal, that was two inches away from Michael Pittman's dive sprawled out hands as he had a full extension in the back of the end zone. It was so close they were so close to making that play. But now the Colts have Carson Wentz, and I think that makes their team a lot better right now, no matter what, just because of what he's able to do from an arm strength standpoint compared to Phillip Rivers. But overall, you're not going to get a quarterback that's as accurate and as consistent as Phillip Rivers. It's pretty hard. So kind of seeing where the Colts go with Carson Wentz and how far they kind of develop as an offense, I think is going to be huge. And like I said with Sam Darnold, it's going to be like a waiting game, and you're going to try to see. You're kind of hoping that Carson Wentz can develop into what he once was and really reach his full potential. But he seems very hungry to do so. Like I said, the Colts are going to have a great team. They have one of the best rosters overall, top to bottom, in the AFC. And you're going up against Brady and the Colts because you have that Colts defense, that stifling Colts defense, and then you have Tom Brady coming into Indy, playing indoors. And I think that's going to be an incredible game. I really do. So whenever that game is, if it's primetime or not, you have the reigning Super Bowl champs, and then you have Carson Wentz and the new look Indianapolis Colts. Both of these teams will be battling for playoff contention. I can almost guarantee that. But yeah, I really think this is going to be a great game, and you can't go wrong with that offense-defense matchup, like I said. The next game I wanted to highlight is the Los Angeles Rams at the Baltimore Ravens. So I think this game is going to be absolutely awesome. You have Lamar Jackson, must-watch TV as always, against Matt Stafford in LA, which I'm very excited to see as well. Both of these teams are going to be at kind of the top of their division. I truly believe that. I believe that when I predicted both of these divisions a few weeks ago. And overall, just the talent on the field in this game. You've got Lamar Jackson. You've got the star-studded secondary that the Ravens have in Marlon Humphreys and Marcus Peters and Chuck Clark, and that defensive front that's always good. But you have Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, who I think is going to take a huge leap in his second year. And overall, I really hope the Ravens get a wide receiver to kind of help that offense become more of a dual threat, because it's not Lamar's fault, but I think they need a true number one wide receiver, and they still haven't gotten that guy yet. Also, you look at the stars on the Rams side, the Rams defensive side of the ball, you have Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald. Watching Aaron Donald try to sack Lamar Jackson, I think, is going to be incredible. That image in my head makes me miss football. Just seeing Aaron Donald, him as a freak athlete, just chasing Lamar Jackson around, who's also a freak athlete. I think that's incredible. And then the Matt Stafford era is starting. So I've talked about this briefly. I think the Matt Stafford era is going to be extremely successful in Los Angeles. I don't know if it'll directly lead to a Super Bowl just because we haven't seen Matt Stafford in those spots too often, in those big games, in those playoff spots too often as of late. But we know what he can do from an arm talent standpoint. We know he can make all the throws. And I just want to see him in an offense like Sean McVay's, because I think a lot of people kind of started to think, I was guilty of this too. I kind of started to think, okay, is the difference between Jared Goff and Matt Stafford that big of a difference? And I kind of started to think, no, the gap isn't too big. And that might still be true, but the more I think about it, I think Sean McVay's coaching style with a quarterback that can do what Matt Stafford can do, I think is just going to be incredibly intriguing. And again, both these teams are going to be at the top of their divisions, and overall, both have solid units on offense, defense, and special teams, and they're both very well-coached teams. So I don't think you could go wrong with this Rams at Ravens game in the week, or in the 17th game of the season. Another game I have highlighted is the 49ers at the Bengals. This might be a surprise just because the Bengals are the Bengals, There's the Cincinnati Bengals. But I still love those helmets, no matter what anyone thinks about the Bengals or how bad they've been in recent history. I love those Tiger helmets, the Tiger stripes. That's the best helmet in the NFL. And above all else, this has the potential to be a great young quarterback matchup, and we get to really see. I'm thinking just about where we'll be at Week 17. We'll know how good Mac Jones is doing, maybe in San Francisco, and then Joe Burrow will be making his complete recovery. Who knows what kind of weapons they have added for him, because I've seen a lot of buzz around the Bengals drafting Jamar Chase. Although it would probably be smarter for them to take a tackle at that spot, I just don't. Jamar Chase seems like more and more of a sure thing each day as this draft process goes on. And they drafted a wide receiver early, T. Higgins out of Clemson. So that kind of makes me think they'll stick with O-line. But I don't know, you have that receiving core, then Joe Burrow is set in terms of weapons. But you really need to make sure he's protected. And you're going to need to make sure he's protected against San Francisco, who has one of the most elite defensive fronts in the NFL. So I picked this game just because, like I said, it might not have a big impact in the standings, but it's two really young and talented teams. I think you're going to have two young quarterbacks, two young head coaches, two innovative offensive minds. And if Joe Burrow makes the steps that he can make, I think the Bengals can definitely win this game, depending on what Mac Jones is doing right away for the 49ers. But overall, I think this will be a great battle, and I'm kind of picking this game over the prospects to watch some of these new players on the team. The next game I kind of have highlighted in my power rankings of the 17th game of the season is the Washington football team at the Buffalo Bills. You've got two of the most electric talents in the NFL in Fitzmagic and Josh Allen. I'm obviously somewhat joking. Josh Allen is one of the more electric talents in the NFL, but Fitzmagic is Fitzmagic. So you never know what you're going to get with some Fitzmagic. I really like some of the matchups I like in this game is Stephon Diggs, who's arguably the best, if not top 3 wide receiver in the NFL today. So I want to see that matchup against the football team's young defense. The Bills are my early pick for the Super Bowl contender from the AFC. I know a lot of people probably think the Chiefs. I just think where the direction the Bills are headed is just a direction of constant improvement. And I think Josh Allen takes yet another step. That defense takes another step. Sean McDermott takes another step as a young head coach, and is going to be a great matchup against the football team, because that defense is no joke for the football team. They have truly one of the best defensive fronts in the league. I can't wait to see Chase Young after a full offseason of working out with NFL training staff and NFL coaches. I think that will be incredible. Although it will be noted, we don't necessarily know who Washington football team will have will be starting at quarterback, because Ron Rivera said this week that they're going to have a quarterback competition. He said he didn't have one last year with Dwayne Haskins. He kind of just gave Dwayne Haskins the starting job, and that was obviously a mistake. So it's kind of good to see Ron Rivera learning from his recent mistakes and then making adjustments for that. Although I don't really know whether it's a quarterback they draft or if it's Taylor Heineke, Kyle Allen. Neither of those two guys are beating out Ryan Fitzpatrick, at least early on in the season. Who knows what happens in the middle of the year if Fitzmagic fizzles out, I guess, towards the middle of the year, and he kind of just starts to play like Fitzmagic, then you could see some change at that position for the football team. But overall, I think you have the prospects of a Fitzmagic late comeback, and then you also have Josh Allen going up against Chase Young in that incredible football team defense. So that's a really intriguing game for me. And then my final game on this list probably could have been higher, but this is just where I'm at, in my opinion, on these two teams. It's the Seattle Seahawks at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, kind of similar to the Patriots versus Cowboys, two storied franchises, two passionate fan bases, and Steelers games are always fun to watch. I hope this is a primetime game just because I love seeing the terrible towels and that black and gold in the nightlight. And overall, the Seahawks, I picked both of these teams to kind of regress this year. Both of these teams, when I was doing my previous division rankings or division previews. Seahawks, I think the drama with Russell Wilson, I think something still could happen with Russell Wilson, although it's a long shot at this point. And then the Steelers, I know Big Ben's coming back and everyone's like, quarterback, QB1, this is my guy. The Steelers re-signed Juju Smith-Schuster, but they lost Bud Dupree. Their defense played so incredible last year that they almost have to take a step back, and that could be false. I think it's still gonna be a great unit, but they're gonna have to take a step back. And overall, just the way they started out hot, winning games against teams that ended up not being all too great, I think kind of has a lasting effect on the team's psyche. And with Seattle, I think I said that Russell Wilson drama this offseason could kind of hover around them as a negative cloud throughout the year. But it's still two of the best teams year in and year out in the NFL, two perennial playoff teams. So I would not be surprised at all if both these two are competing for a playoff spot with this game. But the odds are at least one of them is going to be in the playoff conversation. Also, just the matchup of Russell Wilson versus that Steelers defense, I think that's going to be a great game. The reason I kind of had this last on my power rankings list is just because of where both these teams left off last year. You talk about the Steelers getting blown out in the playoffs, and then Seattle just not being able to score points down the stretch of the year, and then getting stymied by the Rams in the playoffs. So that's where those teams are picking up off this year. Things could be completely different in 2021, but overall, that's my take on those games. So I hope I broke down the best 17th games for all of you. So be excited. I know we've got a whole football season left to kind of we need the whole football season to start before we can really worry about those games and see where those teams are at. But it is interesting that they added a 17th game. The records aren't going to be 8-8, 10-6 this year. It's going to be 10-7, 9-8, 11-6. All of these just don't sound right yet. It's going to take some getting used to. And that wraps up my third segment of the day. So before I get into some more NFL news and division preview, I'm going to we have a quick commercial break. Here's a word from our sponsors at GSMC. As always, I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. As always, visit gsmcpodcast.com/sports, and you can find all of our sports content. If you just go to gsmcpodcast.com, you can find the wide array of different content we at GSMC have for you. But I'll be right back after this word from our sponsors.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
All right, everybody, welcome back for my fourth and final segment of today's episode. Again, I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. This is the GSMC Football Podcast presented by Golden State Media Concepts. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football, on Facebook. Go to our website at GSMCpodcast.com, and you can find all of our sports podcasts at GSMC.com. GSMCpodcast.com/sports. For my fourth and final segment, I'm going to get into a Deshaun Watson update like I do at the end of every episode, it seems. It's just more and more information keeps being released, and I'm going to talk about some trade-up scenarios I like in this year's draft, some kind of out there scenarios that not a lot of people are thinking about, and I'm also going to talk about some predictions for the NFC South, and it's a division I've covered pretty extensively recently, and I'll get into all of that. So Deshaun Watson, his allegations keep getting worse and worse. More and more women keep coming out. It's been pretty interesting to kind of see the NFL media tiptoe around this subject, but overall, I get it, and it's probably the right thing to do, just because, look, there are two sides. If you want to kind of stand on one side definitively, there's two sides you can be on. You're either on the side of Deshaun Watson is a sexual predator and really shouldn't be allowed in the NFL. That's one option, just be based on how many allegations there are and what he's being accused of. Or you think all 22 accusers are lying as a part of a grand scheme to make lawsuit money and take down Deshaun Watson and publicly shame him. Overall, I think the public shaming has been fulfilled to the most of its ability, just because of how many people kind of have already changed their perception on Deshaun Watson already. Most are kind of waiting for the legal proceedings to happen and waiting for everything to develop. It's really just a serious situation, and at some point, there's just way too much smoke for this not to be a concern. This week, Nike suspended its endorsement deal with Deshaun Watson, so I don't think that's permanent. Just like I said, it's another entity that's waiting to kind of see what more information comes out from this. And there was also a recent development of a former Texans masseuse speaking out on behalf of Deshaun Watson. So that is some developing news. I don't know how much you want to trust what a former Texans masseuse says, but she offered her complete trust in Deshaun Watson and didn't believe any of the allegations that have been made. Deshaun Watson's lawyer came out and pretty much definitively said this is all slander and none of these allegations are true. So it's more of this just two sides saying complete opposite things, which is just so confusing in the media world of where to kind of cover this. Deshaun Watson's lawyer said, for Mr. Busby, the opposing attorney, he said, for Mr. Busby, this case has never been about seeking justice in a courtroom, but destroying Deshaun Watson's reputation to enhance his own public profile and enrich himself. They said, we have said this before, we want to say it again, Deshaun Watson did not force, coerce, or intimidate anyone to do anything against their will. When we asked Mr. Busby to identify his clients weeks ago, he refused and told us to file a motion. So 2 days ago, they filed that motion. And as discussed in their filings, Mr. Busby's use of anonymous lawsuits violates Texas law and the basic concept of famous, which is just a legal word that I do not know yet. So Deshaun Watson's lawyer continues to come out and speak for his client. Deshaun Watson has really just remained silent on this situation, but that's all he really can do. I don't think he needs to say anything right now. But if any of these allegations are true, Deshaun Watson will be out of the league, and I don't care about the severity. Sexual assault is a serious issue, and the NFL and the public won't let him return. And that's as they should if these allegations are true. It's hard to kind of imagine one of the more talented and young, bright stars in the league out just like that. But considering all of the trade demand rumors a few weeks ago and everything going on, it's just crazy, the roller coaster we've been on. NFL fans have been on just covering Deshaun Watson. People went from wanting him on his team. Everyone wanted their teams to trade for him. I wanted my team to trade for him. And now we don't know if he's going to play this year. And at the end of the day, that's just scary to think about. I want to see as many talented players in the NFL as I can. But obviously, if any of these are true, he should not be in the NFL anymore. Part of me kind of just thinks that with all of these allegations, it would be one thing if it was 5 women that came out, and that's obviously that would be of a concern too. But 22 allegations, that's just so much smoke, and when there's smoke, there's fire. So overall, with all of those allegations, it's hard to believe that every single woman is just making this up. But you never know with lawyers and lawsuits and the money from these legal proceedings. So I'm going to keep you guys updated on that. But overall, a real sticky situation in Houston. So I'm also going to get into some other draft trade-ups that I like. Jerry Jones is reportedly completely infatuated with Kyle Pitts, like I am. Me and Jerry are one and the same. They pick at 10 right now. I think they have too many needs on defense to trade up for Kyle Pitts. But if he falls there, I would not be surprised at all to see them take it. That's what Jerry Jones does in the draft. He likes to take the flashy players that are going to put people in the seats. And right now, Kyle Pitts is one of those guys in this draft just because of his freakish athleticism. What he'll provide to that offense would automatically be just the number one receiving core in the NFL by far. And yeah, I think Kyle Pitts wouldn't be the best decision, but it wouldn't be the worst decision either, because they could get a cornerback at 10. Like I've had them picking Caleb Farley for the most part, and they just have too many needs on defense to kind of target that position when they have a loaded receiving core already. So Jerry Jones is infatuated with Kyle Pitts, but I don't know if that would be possible or the right move for them. I think it is more inevitable that the Broncos have to trade up in this draft. I've talked about this a lot. John Elway needs to get the quarterback position right, and they can't go into the season with Drew Lock, especially just for Vic Fangio. I think a coach that's in a contract year, a prove-it year for his future as a coach in Denver, you really can't just go into a season with Drew Lock and be like, let's throw him out there. Let's see how many games we can possibly win with Drew Lock. So I think you got to provide some hope and some overall just direction for that franchise and for Vic Fangio. So I think they'll have to target quarterback in the draft, and if they don't trade up, they'll be able to get one at number 9. Don't count out John Gruden. John Gruden has been known to make some bold moves in the past. The Raiders very well could trade up. They have They have to have scouted all the quarterback prospects intensively, and John Gruden loves quarterbacks more than any coach in the NFL, just because I remember watching Gruden's QB camp. He loved meeting with guys out of the draft, talking to prospects, finding what they do good and what they do bad. And overall, I think John Gruden, he has this 10-year contract with the Raiders, and overall, why doesn't he want? I think part of him just wants a new face in that building. And right now, they're going into the season with Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota, so that kind of diminishes the action I see them taking. And overall, this is very unlikely. They'll probably take a defensive player in this draft. But I don't know if one of these quarterbacks is slipping. If Trey Lance starts to slip and John Gruden really likes what he saw from the North Dakota State quarterback, then go get him, John Gruden. Go get him. I also could see the Chargers trading up slightly to pick Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern. Rashawn Slater, I talked about him a few episodes ago. He's probably a top 5 prospect in this draft for me. Although a lot of draft graders have Penei Sewell out of Oregon as a higher prospect than him and going higher in the draft. I think Rashawn Slater, because of what he did in the Big Ten, because of the competition he played going up against Chase Young 2 years ago, and the overall just size and strength and like overall athleticism he provides to the modern day offensive line position, I think the Chargers need a guy like that to kind of shore up the offensive line and then give Justin Herbert a foundational piece that he can kind of build with together, because the Chargers need to protect Justin Herbert at all costs. So I'm going to get into somewhat of an NFC South preview. I think it's going to be a really competitive division, but overall, a lot of turnover across the board. And I talked about the Saints, who they're going to have a completely different team next year, although they have one of the better rosters in this division. Everyone has a lot of turnover, whether it's head coach, quarterback. Saints have Drew Brees retire. The Panthers have a new head coach, as I talked about before. They have Sam Darnold now, too. The Falcons could have a new quarterback in the building, and they have a new head coach. But overall, I think this division is going to be really, really competitive. And here's why. The Buccaneers are obviously going to be at the top. I think it's pretty easy to pick them. I can confidently pick them to win this division just because they completely retooled in this draft. But overall, looking at the Saints, Panthers, and Falcons, it's really a toss-up. And I don't know who it's going to be up to some of these coaches what they can get out of the quarterback position. I think there's a chance Jameis Winston plays really well with Sean Payton and he really just bursts onto the scene and becomes that guy that we always thought he could be in Tampa and isn't turning the ball over 2 times a game and throwing back-breaking interceptions with the game on the line. But I don't know, because that roster is better by far than the Panthers and Falcons. But some of these offensive units, I think if the Panthers can start to develop Sam Darnold, I think that offense could be better than the Saints. The Falcons, depending on who they get in the draft, no matter what, they're going to have some great offensive weapons. That's always been the Saints division, though. And the history says that the Saints will find its way to win a majority of games against the Panthers and the Falcons. But I don't know. There's a lot of turnover, a lot of really hungry teams. So the Saints overall, they finished 12-4 last year, won the division. But Drew Brees obviously retired, and the Buccaneers beat them in the NFC playoffs. So I talked about the Buccaneers. They retooled everyone. They bring back the whole band. It's rare that you see a Super Bowl team keep everyone together, but Tom Brady's coming back. Unless Tom Brady starts to show drastic signs of him diminishing, then the Buccaneers are winning this division. The Panthers I already talked about with Matt Rule. I think this is a huge year for him. Depending on what they do in the draft, I think that defense needs a lot of improvement, and hopefully they show some signs of that early on in the season next year. But I think they can win some of these competitive games in the division. They were 5-11, but like I said, they were competitive all throughout the year, and that was with Teddy Bridgewater. So if Sam Darnold can provide any sort of upgrade, and that defense kind of can take the steps they need to forward, then I think they will be in a great spot. Now the Falcons, I'm gonna predict them. This is gonna be crazy. I'm gonna predict them to finish second in the division. So I've got the Bucs first, the Falcons second, and I'll go Saints third, Panthers fourth. Although I think these are complete toss-ups. I just think the Falcons are due for a good year out of Matt Ryan. They're due for a healthy Julio Jones throughout the year, and Calvin Ridley continues to be one of the best route runners in the NFL. And he really, when Julio Jones goes out, Calvin really steps up his game, and he gets the attention from the number one corners. When Julio is out and when Julio is dealing with the injuries as he does constantly throughout the NFL year, Julio Jones is one of those receivers that always has soft tissue injuries. I feel like he has turf toe like once a year, once every other year. and that sidelines him for a few weeks. So having Calvin Ridley to kind of step up the way he has, I think is huge for them. And overall, that defense, I don't know what to expect from that defense because I like some of the pieces in the secondary. I like the way that defense played last year. They held the Chiefs to 17 points in their loss in down the stretch of the year. But overall, that defense might just not hold up. But I'm predicting the offense to kind of further that gap between the defense and keep them in a lot of games. And then hopefully their new head coach, Arthur Smith, can do everything he possibly can to get a few wins or coach that defense up and really just stay competitive throughout the year, because with those offensive weapons, you can win any game. You saw it last year when the Raiders came to town and they absolutely blew the doors off them. That surprised a lot of people, and I think the Falcons can, when they play their best football, I feel like this is always what people say about the Falcons too, is they just haven't played their best game yet. And it's how they've been for the past 3-4 years under Dan Quinn, so hopefully Arthur Smith kind of changes the culture, changes the tide, because right now they're labeled as a franchise that is always losing close games, is always blowing huge leads, and you just can't trust them. So Falcons fans, I feel your pain, but I really think you guys are going to have a great year, and I think that offense is going to be humming with Arthur Smith. So overall, that will be it for today's episode. I'm really glad you all listened. Hope I covered everything of interest for you guys. I know the draft's coming up in just 3 weeks now. April 29th is when the draft is. That is going to be such an incredible night. I'm going to have so much to talk about after that, so I'll get into some mock drafts as I go forward in the coming weeks with GSMC Football Podcast episodes. But as always, thank you for listening. I'm your host, Wyatt Krieger. You can follow me on Twitter at WKrieger3. Follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. We've been tweeting some of our takes, some of our opinions on the news that's going on throughout the NFL year and all of the developments. So go check that out. As always, check out GSMCpodcast.com, and you can listen to our episodes anywhere that you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Play, Google Play, anywhere. And you can also listen to our podcast on the website as well. Again, thank you guys. I hope you have a great weekend and a great week. I'll see you next Saturday.
The Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.